perfect. It's my privilege and to introduce to you, if you haven't already met Steve Tibbs. He is an exceptionally talented and skilled person at what we're talking about today. He's present on post-pandemic strategy for U.S. parish leaders, clergy and lay leaders alike. And it's a blessing to bring him to the metropolis of New Jersey and the District of New York, on the top of getting our parishioners back to church as we reopen. It's really an opportunity to re-examine how we welcome people, how we engage people in the life of the church. Steve's an expert in strategic planning. He's a longtime parish council member at St. Paul's in Irvine and an active member of the metropolis San Francisco. He implemented their strategic plan and does parish by parish strategic plans also on request. Some may remember him as a presenter at our 2020 National Missions and Evangelism Conference in Columbus last year. It seems like 100 years ago before the pandemic. So we welcome Steve. Steve used to be, we all know him now, but he used to be, he likes to joke, was known better as the husband of Eve Tibbs, but now we know Steve Tibbs. So God bless you, Steve. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Yes, I will always be known as the husband of Eve Tibbs, as Mary Pruitt can attest. So anyway, and with great thanks for that. Well, it's nice to see you. It's a beautiful 4:00 afternoon out here in sunny Southern California. So I hope you're having wonderful weather wherever you might be on the East Coast. This evening, it's really a privilege to share with you some findings that I've discovered and researched, as well as poring over research that others have done to share how we can get our parishioners back to church. And what I'd like to be able to do tonight is do three things. One is create a little bit of context about the journey. Where have we been and where do we see ourselves going? Certainly lessons learned during COVID. And most importantly is what are the plans to go forward? The plan would be to go through the materials briskly. You will have all these materials. This is being recorded as well. And Father James will have the slide deck that I'm using. I joke many times that you paid for the 30 slide deck. I only have 26 slides or so tonight, but hopefully we'll pick up those other 4 slides in Q&A. But we'll be moving briskly through this process. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to apologize up front. So I am a member of St. Paul's Greek Orthodox Church in Irvine, California. Father Stephen Siklis is our postdominant. And I've had the absolute pleasure to be on the parish council for a little over 20 years and as parish council president 14 of those years. And also an honor to work within our metropolis of San Francisco. His Eminence Metropolitan Yerasimos asked me 64 and a half weeks ago to head up the COVID parish support team for the metropolis. And how do I know it was 64 and a half weeks ago? It's because we just on Tuesday, completed our 64th consecutive meeting. So we've met every week for 64 weeks, staying on top of this terrible pandemic. So we've ridden the roller coaster together. And you may or may not have heard that while California is essentially fully open, Los Angeles County did put out a warning a few days ago asking, not mandating, but asking anyone in LA County to wear a mask, vaccinated or unvaccinated, with an indoor setting to slow the spread of the Delta virus, so with the Delta variant. So I've been very close to this journey, both as a parishioner, member of the leadership of a parish, and also our metropolis. So that's how I've kind of collected these. But I am going to use some examples of my own parish. I apologize in advance. I'm not trying to be boastful. I'm just trying to share a couple of examples because we certainly have gotten things wrong, and we've certainly gotten things right, as you all have. I will also share experiences with other parishes that I've had the fortune to work with. I do head up the Orthodox Parish Leadership Ministry of the Metropolis of San Francisco, which allows me to work directly with all of our parishes on a variety of issues, from strategic planning to more focused revitalization plans, capital campaigns, and leadership development and leadership training as well. So that's what kind of keeps me busy during the day portions. This is what I do. I work almost entirely with Orthodox churches. And I have worked with churches throughout the country as well, not just the metropolis of San Francisco. So the reason I'm saying that is I'm going to draw examples from all these parishes and things that I've seen. So with that, then, I will share my screen and we'll get started.
I just turned mine off because it was insane.
Okay. So the title is The Post-Pandemic Parish and Getting Parishioners Back to Church. And those are really two separate topics. And I'll touch on both of those, the post-pandemic parish, more lightly than the focus of getting parishioners back to church. And the getting the parishioners back to church is just a working title, because it's really about bringing our parishioners forward to the fullness of faith, having our parishioners return to receive the Eucharist, to worship together, to sing in unison, to really experience what our church is and the essence of our church. Our church never closed. It diverted into different practices, but we never shied away from who we are and where we're going. But again, we had to take a different path in many cases. So it's really about reopening our doors to have people come and celebrate with us. Now, in order to go forward, let's take a little look in the rearview mirror to see what the journey has been, a little bit of the context. And I am, again, going to be speaking about some of the things we did in San Francisco, but I'm sure these are very applicable to your situations as well. So looking back in April 2020, actually before then, actually in mid-February to early March, I can remember sitting in a meeting with the parish council, and we were talking about putting together a financial contingency plan. As a matter of fact, we ended up writing this and sending it to many metropolises. And that was encouraging parishes to immediately reconstruct their financials in order to prepare for the unknown. And you may recall those times when we would have a discussion saying, well, certainly this isn't going to affect Pascha. Certainly our annual Pascha picnic is still going to go on. And absolutely our festival that's scheduled for mid-June, and that's a go, right? And that first meeting or so, they were still on the books. And by the time we got into that April timeframe, we knew that, long before then, that everything was going to be closed down, and it was. But what that allowed us to do is look back at what many parishes did. They gathered, they put together a plan, and they began to execute on a new plan, a plan they've never had before, a way of thinking they've never had before, and they executed it. And some did well, some procrastinated and didn't do so well. What we also immediately did is, while parishes are focused on helping those in need, parishes launched really aggressive programs to reach out to everyone in their parish, checking in, see how they're doing. The fear of the unknown was gripping us, and certainly seeing our loved ones, our friends afflicted by this, or seeing their loved ones afflicted meant that this was real. And so many parishes put together telephone trees. Philippa Host was leading that in many, many parishes and checking in. And of course, remember those days, we were concerned about supply chains for food. And certainly the toilet paper crisis of 2020 led to some odd questions from people of, do you have enough toilet paper? But that was our life then. What got us through it was very quick action and putting plans together. And then we thought we ebbed and weaved and we bobbed and we went through the remainder of the year with hope that maybe we'd open and then the numbers would go up when we'd pull back. So it was this constant drifting of where are we going to be? And in the winter of 2020, and certainly in California, it hit really hard. And we changed things that we never thought we'd change. We changed parish council elections. We changed our fall general assemblies. In some cases, parishes changed their budget cycles. So all these things that we thought were, administratively pretty cast in concrete, we realized that they aren't, and we could adjust. And certainly the advent of Zoom was actually a major enabler during this period. As we eased out of the winter into the early spring, we began to respond to changes. Once again, things were going up, things were closing down. But in that April and June timeframe, it's when we really started to talk about things like this, to say, what can we do and how do we do it? Well, what we do and how do we do it is exactly what we did in April of 2020. We gathered together as a parish and we put together a unique plan, something that we've never done before, with intentionality. And you're going to hear the term intentionality quite a bit, because that's what we have to be doing. With intentionality, we need to be putting together a plan with intentionality, continuing to reach out to people. So we're going to get to a new normal, but we don't know what that new normal is exactly. We'll talk about that in just a minute as well. So the things that we did right, the planning, the responding to people, meeting their needs, helping one another, we want to keep that, and we should be using that to renew and get back to the fullness of the faith as more people enter for worship and connection with our parishes. This period, this period in here, this inflection period, those of you that work in mathematics know that inflection points are when the point of the curve diverts. Well, this was a huge diversion to us. So we had a major inflection point. We also had this notion of intentionality, is there a black bar across the slides you were saying? Is that blocking it? Are you okay? Okay. We entered the liminal stage. What is the liminal stage? Well, that's a period that is the in-between of and the period of uncertainty. So it happens in 3 stages. And the first stage is separation, where you're stripped of your identity or your status. The things that we knew or know to be true weren't true all of a sudden. Getting up on a Sunday morning, going to church wasn't there anymore. Being affiliated with a ministry in the church, that ministry could not gather. There are many examples of this. And many individuals have a connection through their ministries, and to a certain degree, their self-esteem that they receive by doing good works in the church. Now, I know that we don't seek esteem as we're doing it. We do this humbly, but some people do get a reciprocal response when they are working for the church. That was all gone. And I could say it's gone in an instant. It took months, but in the long spectrum, months is very quick. And so what happens when you're in this period, and examples of this would be your first day after retirement, or if anybody lost a job, they don't know where to go. They don't know how to connect. So we as worshipers didn't know what to do. Priests who had for their entire careers been serving liturgy a certain way, all of a sudden it was gone. One of the things I laugh about, and we do joke about with Father Stephen, who's a wonderful preacher, is any of you that may have known or been to St. Paul, known Father Stephen or been to St. Paul's, know that when he speaks, he has a huge booming voice, and he loves to wander all over the church, and you can hear him all over the church because of his voice. We put an X on a solea and said, "Stand here." Because I can't. I said, if you walk to your left, to your right, you're going to be out of camera range. So all of a sudden we were teaching him how to be a televangelist, right? But it was very awkward for him to be learning that new skill. And now he's great at it. So what happens is when we enter this period of this liminal stage, we're first stripped of our identity, and then it's that in-between period of we don't know where we're going to go. Many of our parishes today are still in this period. They don't know really where to go. They have not got to the third stage, which is a reorientation, where you identify, where you have new identities. Now, let me share with you where this hits the most. And I'm going to show this. I'm going to show you a model in a second, but I'm sorry, let me go back a slide. We have seen this throughout the history of our church, the history of Christianity. We saw it with Moses, leaving behind, his position of power to lead the Israelites. We've seen St. Paul on the road to Damascus, blinded and taking on a new journey, leaving behind his old and rediscovering his new. And certainly we've seen this with our Lord when he wandered the desert after his baptism before he started his ministry in Galilee. So there are examples where individuals have been challenged, where their prior identity was significantly altered or stripped away, and they created a new direction and a new identity. Within your parishes right now, you have that ability. You have the ability not to totally hit the reset button, but certainly this is an opportunity as you regather to redirect things that you thought were institutional, things you could never change. Where we're seeing this the most, this is a model that I typically use when we do an early on assessment in strategic planning. I think it's a representation of, I use it as a representation of a parish as the living house of faith. And in this, you can see that everything comes from the top down. Our worship, our personal faith formation, our worship during this time did not change, right? Our beliefs, our theology, our ethos did not change. What changed, and this is what we're seeing that has not come back to a full degree, is everything here. If you will, leadership, culture, and vision, worship, personal faith formation, these are transformational elements of a parish. These are the things that go across all lines. As you can see, the way it's represented here, embrace everything that we do in a parish. The transactional elements are the things that we do, the ministries, the stewardship, those elements. These are the areas here that in most parishes, most of these are still currently adrift. These are the ones that you can hit the reset button on. These are the ones that say, well, our fundraising, we haven't had fundraising. How do we rebuild that? What's our new identity in fundraising? What's our new identity in stewardship? Our Christian education programs, Sunday schools were all but, have been gone for, over a year. How do we reconstruct those come September? Our cultural connection, our connection to festivals, our connection to who we are, represent ourselves, or represent to the local community. Our faith formation, Bible studies were closed down. We had to go to Zoom. We had to learn that new thing. So all of these, if you look, I'm not going to go through all these, you can see them for yourself. But the reality is all these areas are still in flux. And this should be part of the plan. How are we going to intentionally rebuild these and reopen these elements? Because these are extremely key touch points to parishioners. If you look at research, well, I'll get to this research in just a second, but we know that, and all of you on the call as well, know that there are certain touch points here for you, and they've gone away. Facility maintenance took on a whole different meaning this last year and a half. Some parishes took the opportunity, because they had the funds, to complete remodels, to rehab some areas of their parish and their church. One parish actually moved out of their sanctuary and into the hall and took that time to do about a 6-month renovation on their church. So these are the areas that are causing individuals some distance. And this is where the greatest opportunity probably lies. From a worship perspective, some parishes, depending on your state and local guidelines, may be fully open. Most are, but not all. And so that would depend on how you can continue to worship. When I talked earlier about the notion of the post-pandemic parish, this model here represents all the different areas in a post-pandemic restructuring. Certainly worship, things as easy, it's only 3 weeks ago that, we made Koleva available, even available after memorial services. The notion of kissing a cross, veneering an icon, we just restarted that 3 weeks ago. So all this period of time, and we haven't fully implemented all elements, but certainly worship has been altered significantly and not come fully back. From a technology standpoint, oh my gosh, the new term now, right, is digital strategy. And what's happening is that technology has so permeated so much more of the parish. I'm suggesting to parishes that they create indeed a digital strategy, because technology fills their entire activity base in the church, from worship, live streaming, to stewardship and donations, to connections. Technology is there. The other area then is we're going to talk about specifically tonight is on parishioners, but we also have health and safety. Some parishioners are not comfortable coming fully back yet, and that's fine, but there's been this increase of awareness on safety and cleanliness. Before the pandemic hit, there was a growing concern in our parishes around security. Security to protect people in the church while they worship. Active parishes it was not uncommon to see active shooter drills. Certainly parishes putting together plans, working with local police departments. That pretty much went away during the pandemic. Now, unfortunately, we saw some instances where this has now come back in our society since then. But really, this notion of health and safety of our parishioners and being there to protect one another is going to remain. It's not going to immediately get turned off. So what are we seeing? Well, parishes that are coming back to full worship still have hand sanitizers. They still will, some people are still wearing masks, and that's absolutely fine. And others are asking to be distanced as they sit, and that's fine too. So it's that taking that personal attention. And that's one of the key things that we need to be doing as well, is meeting people where they are, recognizing what their needs are, and meeting them and fulfilling their needs. We need to do that first, allow them and help them enter the doors of the church to feel comfortable. Certainly ministries, as I mentioned, all went away. Digital impact on our ministries, and they're slowly opening up. Some youth events here and there, but again, for the most part, many of our ministries have gone by the wayside, or they're purely digital. Finances, what did we learn? Well, we learned that contingency planning and keeping an eye on your finances constantly is important. We learned how to do PPP loans and EIDL and those sort of things. But we also found that we aren't reliant on our festivals. That is something that many parishes, many summer years as well, have said, how long can we continue to do this? We have an aging population. We are used to be a inner city location, and now everyone's moved out, and our base of parishioners is remote. What do we do? Well, there are many parishes that have just simply said, we're not going to go back to festivals, or we're going to do an alternative, right? We're going to have a drive-through festival. We're going to have a series of maybe 3 festivals over the course of the year. But also what's come up is the primary purpose of the festival is to bring people onto our church site, our campus, if you will, and give them a church tour and expose to them, maybe for the first time, what we're about. So that element is now weighing on the chairpersons of festivals, is how do we maintain our outreach impact and our evangelism impact if we cancel a festival, which is good thinking. And then finally, stewardship. One of the things that I just read, the Lake Institute of the University of Indiana just wrote their summary of 2020 giving. And in the year of 2020, donations to religious organizations actually increased about 3%. That was, I think, the third or fourth highest category, the highest being hospitals and medical providers, private donations of those organizations, and then also relief funds. But I think we all saw and were somewhat pleasantly surprised, or maybe relieved is a better term, that stewardship money came in. And that reinforced this notion that we don't have a money problem. We don't have a people problem. We have an engagement problem. People were not there, but they saw a reason to give. It was very purpose driven, and that connected to them. And they gave. My own parish, we, in our contingency plan, reduced the amount of our stewardship expectation, and we ended up at the end of the year exceeding our original number. And that has been somewhat commonplace. So what we learned from that was that we can think differently about stewardship as well. There are parishes now in discussions about, do they keep the festival? Do they have alternatives? Remember, they're going to hit the reset button to determine what they should be doing. But tonight, again, we're going to be looking at parishioners. Now, one of the things I'd like to share with you as well is this notion of digital strategy and live streaming. A lot of parishes also are grappling with this. I am going to assume that most of your parishes are still live stream. There are some priests that have indicated once we go to full worship, once we're fully open, we're going to cut off the feed because people need to be in church. Others are saying, no, it's a wonderful mechanism to connect with those that cannot attend, those that might be out of town. And so they are keeping live streaming going. Still, other priests are suggesting that they close live stream after the gospel. So the key on this is for parishes, especially we're going to be getting into a budgeting period pretty soon for next year, is asking yourself, what is our digital strategy? Do we keep live streaming? And this is something that, again, 2 years ago, how many parishes live streamed? And then parishes went to either strapping a iPad or their phone to a chair, and then others went to multi-camera systems and got very elaborate. Suffice to say, all parishes improved over this period of time with live streaming. So I don't know. I mean, it all depends on the situation, the parish, the composition of your parishioners. There are definite benefits to shut-ins, the infirm, travelers, and inquirers. They could now walk behind the doors of an Orthodox church and see. And this is one thing that I'm picking up a lot within the metropolis of San Francisco's parishes, is that we're having a lot of new visitors, part and parcel because they were able to watch our liturgy during this pandemic. The downside, it encourages separation. It encourages the habit of separating from the Eucharist. Also teaches kind of unorthodox behaviors. When I say watching, it really struck me when I spoke to a good friend and just asked her, are you going to be returning to church? And she said, yeah, but it's really going to be hard to get out of the habit of watching, that was the key word, watching liturgy in my pajamas, eating a bowl of cereal. Well, you know what? What's happened is this last year, we've all formed habits. And as you know, once you acquire a habit, it takes a very focused energy to break that habit. We were in the habit of going to church on a Sunday. If you break that habit, and I don't mean to minimize it like it's a trivial thing, but you do get your family patterns, your family processes in place. That's what I mean by habit, especially if you have children. So the downside of the digital strategy is it could break that habit of regular attendance, church attendance as well. So what have we learned? Well, during this period, we learned that we can move very fast. We can. We can make rapid decisions. We can come together very quickly. We can take care of those in need. During the drop, that inverse bell curve I showed you, we were worried about physical needs. Do people have medications? Do they have supplies? Do they have food? And then that quickly moved into emotional support. And we saw that after December, that November, December, January timeframe, where we were just checking in to see if they needed someone to talk to, seeing if they were lonely, and because it was wearing on people significantly by that time. So we did this. This is what we do. We're a church. We should be doing this. And then also, some parishes took care of the needs of those within their communities as well. Put together outreach programs to fundraise, to pay for medical needs or supplies to shelters or neighborhoods within their communities. That's a good thing. We want to keep that. We also thought we connected in ways we never thought before possible. A parish council meeting on Zoom, a general assembly on Zoom, a metropolis clergy laity on Zoom, a national clergy meeting on Zoom. No, we never thought that would ever happen, but it did happen. And we adapted to it and we moved on. And it's be very interesting to see what we keep. We also look beyond our own parish for answers. Now, sometimes parishes get a little competitive. That happens. Not saying it's right, but it happens. But you know what? We drop that and we wanted to learn from one another and we want to actively share with one another. We put together meetings for festival chairs so they could learn from each other of who had a drive-through festival and where did they serve and those sort of things. Or we had meetings just for parish council presidents to talk about how their leadership has changed during this period and shared stories and best practices of what they were doing. We also had special meetings just for stewardship chairs, as you are doing tonight, and then also for treasurers. Matter of fact, we put together a treasurers group that now has stayed intact, and we have a group in Metropolis, San Francisco, that provides coaching to parishes and specifically parish treasurers on that topic. So we looked beyond, we shared, and we again helped one another. We nimbly responded. I don't know about the East Coast, but certainly out here, the goalposts changed rapidly. So while you thought you had an answer, 2 weeks later, that answer shifted on you, and we had to adapt. And after doing that a few times, we got pretty good at it as well. Did we enjoy it? No, but we really adapted to it as well. And that leads to the next thing. We showed our resiliency. We hung in there, and we're still hanging in there. Right? We're still hanging in there. Again, that gets to the emotional support that we give to one another and just our belief in God that we're going to get through this. Our churches, our history of Christianity has been challenged. Well, this is our time. This is our time to respond. This is our time to grow in the face of adversity. We challenged our own paradigms. As I mentioned, Greek festivals, live streaming worship, digital general assemblies, studies online, prayer groups online. We never did that before. Now, one of the things that was pointed out to me by one parish is in the area of prayer groups online. They said, boy, that sounds like a Protestant church. Well, you know what? One of the things that Protestant churches do, and not talking about their worship or their theology, is they connect people. They connect people in small groups. And what we saw was this small group mentality beginning to bubble up here and there. Bible studies within cities, smaller connection. We had one parish that started with two women that asked the priest if they could go into church from 9 to 10 every morning and read the Psalms. And at last look, I think they had about 15 people now joining them almost every day as they read and pray together. What a wonderful thing. And that came out of this. People do respond and support a purposeful need. That's what I mentioned on the stewardship, that they will give. If anybody has read The Purpose-Driven Church by Rick Warren, the pastor of a mega church out here in Southern California. His whole point is that if there's purpose, people can understand that purpose, they will be more inclined to give and give heartily. Also, if their heart is with God, they will give graciously and generously. We also return to the true essence of our church. We sought the Eucharist. We sought worship. We prioritize that over ministries and connections, and that reinforce. So we want to keep that. Remember, there's some things we want to change, but things we really want to reinforce. So we reconnected, and we felt it. We felt that when we weren't receiving communion, I could feel it, and it caused distress to people. So that's something that reinforced and reinforced our true beliefs. The other thing we saw is if your parish was pre-COVID healthy, it remained healthy, it even got stronger. If there was trust in leadership, if there was good communication, if there was good financial management, that got you through better than if there was a lack of trust, if there was questioning, if there was poor administrative excellence. So if you had a culture that was committed to these things of engagement, culture, working together, then you're much better off than a parish that struggled because this pandemic exposed those wounds. And they had to really redirect significantly. And some haven't. They're still being challenged by that. So that's what we've learned. Now, let me share with you also, I'm in the process of working with a parish on their strategic plan. And this is fresh because this was only generated last week. One of the things we did on the strategic plan is we said, well, we're not going to ignore the pandemic. So one of the exercises we went through, and I would really recommend that you have an exercise in your parish, minimally with the parish council, but with parishioners as well. What did we learn from the pandemic? Well, this is what one parish said. They learned that stewardship alone can sustain them. Big festival parish, by the way. That stewardship can sustain them. And they want to figure out how to become a tithing church. They want to take it up a notch. They recognize that technology is an enabler, but it's not a replacement for worship. That engagement was both an opportunity and a challenge. Engagement from the standpoint that they saw people coming forward that hadn't otherwise been engaged, especially in the technology area, that people were good in technology that hadn't been asked to help before. But also they found that the 80-20 rule was becoming 90-10 or even 95-5. That more of the core parishioners were carrying a greater load. And you probably have seen that in all your parishes as well. And I'm going to tell you, once the doors opened, the unsung heroes in the process, in my mind, were the ushers. These ushers had to show compassion and understanding as people were showing their trepidations about returning to worship. Leadership was vital. Leadership coordination was vital. If there was any ministry activity, if there was any planning, especially coming out of the pandemic, extremely important to communicate. So ministries, talking with the parish council, staying close to flow to host, it was very important that that remained. Now, if you didn't have that, you're challenged. If you had that already, it was a benefit. Organization and coordination are critical. It's kind of alluded to that as well. Safety is valued more than ever. I kind of talked about that. And then the worship experience cannot be simulated. And so this is what one parish. But at the end of the day, we kind of boiled this down and said, what do you really want to keep? What do you really want to keep? Here's what they said. We want to keep three things. First of all, we want to keep our focus on stewardship. We want to be able to allow parishioners to bring their gifts forward and return back to God the way it's meant to be. That we are just nothing but stewards of the gifts that He has given us. And there will be an accounting of what we did with the gifts, because we don't own anything. They're all from God. So they're going to keep that message, and they're going to try as hard as they can to reconstruct their festivals to a different meaning and purpose and meet all their operating obligations just with stewardship. The next area is they do want to keep live streaming. They see it as a benefit. They talked about the pros and cons, and the belief is that because where they are, they're in a dense city, that it's best to have live streaming continue, but coupled with really powerful messages to come and join us. And then finally, connections. So they've shown that they can stay connected with brief phone calls. You know, one parishioner that I know, he became masterful at the 60 to 90-second phone call. And this is an individual that never had any formal role in the parish, stepped forward, started making phone calls, and he would make 100 phone calls a week. And they were all these 60 to 90 seconds, some longer, obviously. But it was just to check in, how you doing? And everyone, he says, please remember, we love you. And so powerful. And he worked the list, and when he got through with that list, he went to the top and did it again. And when he went to the bottom of it, he did it again. So these are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone calls this individual made. And, you know, now he's known for that. So it's being connected and figure out unique ways for that. The other thing that hasn't changed is our society, right? We had challenges before this happened. So we can't discount what happened or was happening or is happening outside of COVID. Some of you may have seen this research. I've pulling from Barna, which is a research organization that do specialize in religious organizations, Gallup, and our own studies with the Assembly of Bishops. And here are some kind of headlines. Again, you may have seen some of these already. In 2020, 47% of US adults identified as belonging to a church, synagogue, or a mosque, identifying to a religious organization. That is the first time in our US history that we have been below 50% as a society. As a frame of reference, in 2010, we were at 61%. In 10 years, we've dropped. In 1943, we were 73%. So the trend is not going in the right direction. So we are challenged then within our society itself and the societal viewpoint of religion to draw and continue to grow and fulfill the Great Commission. 40% of millennial youth claim no religious affiliation. That's a big challenge for us as well, because they are the future. You know, the church is their future, but they are also the future of the church. 20% of all Orthodox Christians regularly attend church on Sundays. 74% do not. So that's an opportunity. And 47% of cradle Orthodox have left the church. So we have challenges both within our society and within our own parishes as well to connect and draw people back. Remember, time to reset the button and figure out how we can draw people back in and touch on some of these groups. As a result of the pandemic, we have further research. The Barna research went out and asked people, what do you miss most about in-person worship services? Now, I will say that this was not expressly an Orthodox research, but all churches, and with a large involvement from the Catholic Church. The three things they missed most was, number one, taking communion. Close behind that, however, was socializing before and after services. And the third one, something all clergy love to hear, listening to a live sermon. And not just watching it, but really being there to experience a live sermon. They missed that. You know, one of the things about the socializing before and after services, and again, we all experienced this, is even when we did get together, we were encouraged to go straight to our cars, not congregate, keep your mask on. And it was kind of socializing, but kind of not. At St. Paul's in Irvine, we've just had our 4th consecutive coffee hour. And I'm going to tell you, I've never seen people happier, and myself included, just to be able to see people. And there's still a little trepidation about hugging and kissing, but just to be in the presence of others is so uplifting. Also, during the course of the pandemic, on average, only 3 in 10 adult churchgoers had direct contact with their pastor. So there's a great unserved community out there as well. And the caution to the clergy is that when people do return, there may be a swarm of requests to meet. Live streaming of services does have a purpose, but it doesn't replace true worship. 53% of practicing Christians said they watch services online. Now, what that tells me, however, is during the height of the pandemic, 47% did not. And so there's that opportunity that we need to take a look at that from a habit perspective. And the largest groups that have not returned to in-person worship, families with children, should not be a surprise. You probably have looked around your parish on a Sunday and seen that the children are not there. If the children are not there, their families are not there. Now, there have been slight improvements in that area, but for the most part, the children are gone. We've lost the marginal Orthodox, those that maybe attended once a month, maybe attended once every couple of months, aren't attending. Hopefully they're still being connected through live streaming. We don't know that. But the marginal Orthodox have all been gone away. Seniors have come up just recently as a slow return once we've reopened the churches. That kind of throws a false narrative or false perception, because so much of our parishes, the dominant age group are seniors, those over 55 years old. I'm using that as a calibration. I'm not calling all 55 years old seniors, but just a calibration point. So if you look at your parishes that are over 55, what percentage of those? So when you see the mix of parishioners who have returned, there could be a higher mix of 55-year-olds, but that's a smaller portion of the total body of that age group. Ministry volunteers is very interesting, is because ministries haven't formed, but the early indication is that, and what we're telling ministry leaders is, do not assume that all of your ministry participants are going to be returning. Let me give an example. One church school director who has a very vibrant church school. They have about 120 to 130 Sunday school children every Sunday pre-pandemic. Church staff of about 40 people. With a story, they have teachers and aides and that sort of thing. They're gearing up for September. And the director contacted all of her teachers and said, are you going to be returning? 3 of the stalwart kind of cornerstones that have been there for years and years said, no, I won't be returning. I've been away for a year and a half. It's a good time to take a break. Choirs that are now reassembling. Choir members love to sing and participate in the liturgy. But still, some are not returning. Active parish ministries like Parish Council, they've been active this whole time, so they haven't slowed down. The Philipto's board hasn't slowed down. So from that perspective, some of the board members and leadership have stayed very engaged. And of course, you started probably a reopening team or some sort of team that were very engaged as well. But what we're telling ministry leaders is go early and reconnect with your ministry teams. Remember, small groups. Talk to your small group about that as well. And that's a caution going forward when we do it. So earlier, look earlier, reconnect faster with your ministries. The Barna Group also did a study just recently on the post-COVID church service preferences. So the basis was, if they've been church in the last 6 months. And I find this interesting. And if you look down here from Gen Z, and millennials, and Gen X's, and boomers, the majority of many of our parishes are in that boomer, or certainly the Gen X and boomer categories in our parishes. If you look at the boomers, 71% say that they would prefer post-COVID to return live, physically present in the church. And 26% said they were both fine and being online. So that means, combined 95% said, yes, they would prefer to be in church, or certainly open to returning to church. But you can see, we see a decline of under 50% on the other 3 categories of the return to church, and a very strong preference in the middle to primarily return to just digital worship. So this is something we need to keep in mind as well, and really target our messages to these age groups to say, please return, please, watch us if you have to, but join us because you need to. And so, and you can see parents as well, where that split is 13% preferring just to be digital. And of course, that follows very closely with the age group of the millennials, which is probably the majority of the parents. So when you put your strategies together, it's important to look at your age distribution and figure out what the characteristics of that group would be, because they're all going to be a little bit different. So hopefully this slide helps you as well, get some insights to that. What are we seeing in terms of rate of return? We're seeing about a 60 to 70% rate of return of parishioners to divine liturgy. The core, those people that were always there, they're still there, right? They were probably your most active in live streaming when they couldn't attend, and as soon as the doors were open, they immediately came back. And these are individuals and families that you are just accustomed to see because they're always there. And they're still attending. They came back and haven't seen much of a decline. What we are seeing is sliding for those individuals that maybe were twice a month. Now they're once a month. Now, what we're also seeing is a churn. So what do I mean by that? Well, you have a core group, and then this other group, we're going to talk about the different stratifications of members in a minute, but you're seeing this other group kind of swap seats. So if one family comes once a month or one couple comes once a month, the next week, another family who comes once a month kind of fills that seat. And then the third week, maybe it's that group that came, that family or that family unit that came the first week, they're back in the third week, or maybe it's a new family. So we have a percentage. If everybody attended all at one time, we estimate there probably would be a loss of about 20%, maybe less than that. But because we're getting the sliding effect, it's hard to really fully calibrate how many return. But the rule of thumb is we have about 20% that is lost, and we need to find them. Now, I'm not counting the 20% that never came anyway. I'm talking about 20% that were at least attenders and you knew them in church and they were involved in some way. So that's our opportunity is for us as well. And we're seeing this across the board. We're actually seeing a little lower percentages in Protestant churches, a little higher percentages I'm seeing in Orthodox churches. But what are the benefits? You talk to somebody and say, well, why do I need to go to liturgy, right? There's benefits to staying home. Save time and gas, the hassle of getting on a train or getting a cab. I arrive when I like. I don't feel guilty if I walk in just before the epistle reading. There's no dress code. I always have a good seat. I'm always comfortable. I can record it and see it later, which I'm sure you've heard. I miss liturgy, but I'll watch it during the course of the week, and some do, most don't. And I don't have to worry about my kids being noisy or being fidgety. If those look at the Divine Liturgy as only performance art, well, they can still enjoy it online. Now, the choirs aren't back fully, but the hymns are beautiful, and if choirs are there, they can still appreciate that. They can still see the iconography and the visual appeal of the church. They can reconnect because people like to see their own church from a live streaming experience. And we've always had parishes throughout the United States that if you couldn't make it to church on a Sunday for whatever reason, you could go to that parish and watch it. And people said, but that's not my parish. Even seeing the people online, I don't know them. I don't feel as connected. The gospel teaches us online, it teaches us in person. Actually, one person said, I can actually hear better online, so I can understand the gospel and the epistle better than I could when I was sitting because of the acoustics of the church. And, I just appreciate the viewing of this entire experience. Is there something more? Absolutely. Holy Communion. But even at that, some parishes were saying, well, you know what? You can make an appointment. You can still receive communion, and you can time your arrival. You can pull up just before communion, walk into the church, receive it, and walk back out again. All these indicate, obviously, bad habits. These are the habits that have to be broken. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about that when we talk about some ideas. The key on this, though, is we have to look back at what Jesus taught. What did he teach his disciples? Where 2 or 3 gathered in my name, I'm there in the midst of them. Talking to the end of the Last Supper, he makes the following request: do this in remembrance of me, right? So the disciples broke bread, they shared the common cup in remembrance and in the presence of Jesus. Let us not consider how to stir up one another to love, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Hebrews. How prophetic is that? We could put that in all of our churches today as a major challenge. The church worships together, physically present, gathered in one place, not just to watch, not just to listen. That was always a challenge anyway. Research has shown that 70% of the time, a parishioner, their mind's wandering in church. So we always have to discipline ourselves, be more active, not just watch and listen. We come together in faith to thank and worship our Lord and Savior in a beautiful dialogue between clergy and laity. The responses, we remind one another, Christ is in our midst, and we respond, he is and shall always be. We have to remember that we are a congregation, not an audience. If we see ourselves and had seen ourselves before pandemic as just an audience viewing the liturgy, then it's no different than me viewing it from my home. And so, remember I said before, if the church was healthy, was faithful, was worshiping, then you're going to see more people returning. If people were just watching, they can watch from home and justify it with those other rationales that I provided. So, what do we do? First of all, reflecting on Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. At this time, as leaders, as members of a parish, we should be praying for discernment, for how to approach someone, how to offer our skills, how to do the right thing at the right time, how to recognize need, how to respond to need. So our prayers are for discernment to do the right things to help regrow and reconnect our parish. There are some practical things I'd like to share. I've seen this I've compiled this from a number of parishes. Number one, do what we did in the past. We form a reconnection team. Now, in the past, in April of 2020, we formed reopening teams for the hope of reopening our parish, and unfortunately, those turned into closing teams. But with intentionality, we formed a reconnect team. The team prays for guidance, is a cross-ministry team, and it leads the parish in re-engagement activities. What gets written, what gets measured, that's what gets done. So we want to have an actual written plan in place for this, and that gets into the next area. When you're doing your plan, revisit the why. Why does our parish exist? Well, for the salvation of our parishioners, to help people draw closer to God, and that includes ourselves. So if the aim and the focus is to draw people closer to God, that means they must come in a presence in the church, worshiping together and receiving the Eucharist. Note what's worked well in your parish and keep that. The new Sunday morning and the parishioner profiles have to be kept in mind. I'll share what those are in just a minute. And then implement with intentionality. Define areas of action, communicate, monitor, revise, just like you would on the implementation of any plan. That's exactly what parishes did during the beginning of the pandemic. They put a plan together and they monitor that very closely. Keep those same behaviors. So let's talk about that first element, forming a reconnection team. The reconnection team needs a reconnection lead, one person. when I work with parishes that are forming ministries or ministries in Metropolis, they ask me how many people does it need to take to start a ministry. My response is one person. That's it. One person with a passion. That's what it takes. An example of that would be in my own parish, we have one person that was passionate about building wells in Africa. One guy. And now we've built through other parishes as well, nearly 30 wells in Africa that's impacting the lives of 150,000 people. But it was one person that had the passion to bring forward and do it. So have a team lead that is passionate about this engagement. Build a team of about 8 to 12 very engaged parishioners with that person. My recommendation is that that team would include the predominant, the parish council president, your parish health officer, if you have one there. If not, have somebody that is very in tune with the local health activities. We'd have your FLOPDOS president, members, probably not your entire council, but parish council members. And if you have an office administrator or a facilities manager, I would include them as well. Because we still might have to do some things in our facilities, especially as we reopen Sunday schools or whatever the case might be. Or we've neglected some maintenance, we might have to address that. The office administrator knows a lot of people by name. That person may or may not be putting in stewardship records. So one of the first things you want to do is take a look at your stewardship records and see who's still participating. You don't have to look at the amounts, just who's missing, and put together a plan for that. So this team is going to build and implement the Reconnect plan. When you're developing your Reconnect plan, have some specific design principles. I can't tell you exactly what every plan is going to look like, but have key principles that are going to drive your plan. So the first thing is link to your why. Why does the parish exist? What is the primary purpose of gathering? Well, we've already said that, right? The second one is know your audience. And I'll share with you in just a minute that. But identify, remember, we look back at the composition, the age composition, could also be the location composition, people that live close, people that are commuters, whatever the case might be. Your plan should be simple and concise. It doesn't have to be overly elaborate. It could be 10 to-do items. It could be 7 to-do items. But get agreement and work on it together. Start now. If you haven't started now, you're too late. We're not too late. You're later than we'd like. But start now. On average, in April of 2020, with working with parishes, to put a contingency plan together, looking at ministries, looking at finances, looking at all the elements of the parish, took about 10 days or less to put together that plan because there was a strong need. We want to have that strong need and desire now. So form a team and challenge yourselves that within 10 days, we're going to have a plan in place. It can be done, I guarantee it. And then make sure to assign tasks. Have accountability. Okay, what gets measured, but as accountability, that's what gets done. And with love, support those individuals if they're having difficulty, but you want to make sure that it's just good planning to assign it to someone. And then, you know what? Be creative and have fun. You know, people need to laugh a little bit. They need to have some uplift to this terrible challenge we've had. And so it's okay to be creative and have fun. We'll talk about some ideas as we move on here. So let me tell you about 4 components that I recommend in your plan. The first one is to form, and this is outside just this core team, but form a welcome team. Establish a welcome ministry. And if you haven't already done a welcome ministry, now's a great time to do that. Those of you that had a welcome ministry that may have gone dormant, this is where you need to check in to see if your ministry participants are still going to be available. But now more than ever, you want to be welcoming people into the church. They might have some apprehension about going in. The Archdiocese, the Stewardship and Evangelism ministry has wonderful materials on welcoming that can be used. And I know many parishes have tremendous materials. So start a welcome ministry. It should be friendly and engaging. Some of your, I just saw this last Sunday, the head of one welcome team still wears a mask, but she absolutely smiled with her eyes. And so whoever's out there, they should be engaging. And it's more than a hello. It's a nod of the head if someone's comfortable, a handshake, or if other people are still comfortable, a hug, but that depends on the individuals. I'm not suggesting that. That's between them. Have to go information packets. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, all welcome tables, and it should be a table or a fixed location I'm recommending, has materials. Make it simple to take. And if you have to create new materials that you want to put into a bag or whatever the case might be, that people can kind of self-serve, that's fine, but make your information very accessible. Some parishes have worship buddies, those individuals that if someone's there for the first time, they will ask an usher or a parishioner to check in, even offer in some cases to sit with those new visitors or sit in proximity, maybe behind them or off to the side to answer any questions that they might have. Now that's obviously gone by the wayside. Some are slowly engaging on that. Most have not yet. They're still trying to get settled into the church. And the welcome team is not just a table that's set up outside. By the way, this is set up outside the narthex, not in the narthex, because you want to be able to have a conversation. But the welcome team generally welcomes the people, opens the door for them, doesn't make the person open it themselves because you're welcoming them in, and then essentially turns them over to the ushers. And either through an introduction, like we want to make that person feel comfortable, because this may be people that have watched online and now have summoned the curiosity or the courage to actually come visit live. So we want to make them as pleasant as we can. We're a church. We're supposed to welcome people. That's what people expect, by the way. This is also focused on the occasional Orthodox or Orthodox who have drifted away that have come back for the first time. Same thing. We should welcome anybody, but make them feel a little bit more special, because they have been away, and they might feel a little awkward. So we're going to get through that awkwardness as well. We also want to put together a connection team. Like the individual that I mentioned that did these hundreds of phone calls. Well, we want to form a connection team. That should have a lead as well. Calls, letters, personal notes. It's all about personal one-on-one connection. Some parishes now are putting together invite a friend, call back a friend sessions where they'll pick a date, at the end of summer, early fall, where they're going to do a big activity at their parish to invite a friend. As I mentioned before, review your stewardship list. See who isn't participating as a steward that has in the past. And it's a phone call to them, not to ask them if they've submitted a stewardship card. It's to say, how are you? And we miss you. Don't even bring up a stewardship or a membership card. Look at your parish directory. I guarantee if you look at your parish directory, you're going to go, oh, wait a minute. Where'd this person go? I haven't seen them for a long time. The reason the prostamino is so important on this team, because the nature of what they do, he will have background information on some individuals. And he won't share that information, but he might say, you know what, let's just pass on this individual at this time, knowing that there's some issues with the family or the individual. And that's why it's important to recognize that as well. Or he might give some advice. We want to activate local small groups, as I mentioned. Hey, we're having a gathering at this home. It'll be outside. You're in the same zip code or same general area. Come join us. Backyard barbecues. Doesn't have to be other than fellowship. Ask them just to join for worship. Yeah, please come to church. And tell them that they were missed, and they are missed. And everybody enjoys hearing that, but it means a lot to someone to say that they're missed and they would like like you return. Also, ask if we can help. Now, this sounds like it's about a half an hour conversation, and some of them could be half-hour conversations. Most of them are going to be much shorter as you're sharing these messages, and you're listening to what they might need. Contact them more than once, right? The old thing is tell them what you're going to tell them, go back and tell them one more time. When we do communication events for parish surveys or strategic plans or whatever the case might be, I use that 3-step process and add a fourth, which is once you've told them again, tell them one more time. Tell them one more time that they're missed. Don't want to harass them, but let them know that you'd like them to return and you appreciate that. Use a multimedia approach. Those of you that have not updated your websites for a while, update your websites. Update your websites and change it with a message. We miss you. Come back and join us, right? Open every Sunday. Whatever message that you feel appropriate, but a strong message to say, come and receive. And from a technology standpoint as well, handwritten notes are second best to an actual phone call or touch base. Let's face it, emails, we're all inundated with emails. It becomes kind of an impersonal situation. But if you have to do that as well. So this connecting should get really creative as well. Celebrate. Have parish luncheons. I can't tell you how many parishes are planning luncheons, in September, even during the summer. Youth Glendies are, on the books for summer with parishes. Family picnics, missed celebrations. One parish last week had their George's coffee hour. They missed St. George because the church wasn't open at that time, but annually all the Georges get together and they host coffee hour, kind of an elaborate coffee hour. So they did it last week. They said, no, we're not going to miss because we had to miss it all last year. And of course, immediately the priest picked up on that and said, well, where's all the Steves, right? Where's Stevens and Stephanos? So it kind of challenged me or my group, our namesakes to do that. It's okay, have some fun with that. There's some individuals that had to cancel the blessing of their marriage of 50 years, 40 years, whatever the case might be. And so they're on year 51, but they're still going to do it. They're still going to come back and have their marriage blessed. And so we lost that year, but we also learned that because we lost that year doesn't mean we can't celebrate these milestones that have passed. And people want to enjoy these things. So have some fun. And of course, returning a coffee hour, whether you have or not, I assume most parishes probably have. But it's just that notion of being within the state and local guidelines, but just experiencing that fellowship. Remember, the second most important thing on that Barna survey was socializing before and after church. The next thing as well, and this is something that we probably all should do anyway, is simplify the visit. Remove as many obstacles from attending as possible. The mindset behind that is you might have people that haven't been there for a while, weren't active in a prolonged period of time. They may have kind of forgotten, where do I park and where do I walk and those sort of things. And certainly new visitors. So take I call it the simplification walk, right? Take the visitor walk. Look at your parish from the street view in. Off topic a little bit, but you would look at your parking lot, your roof, and your walls to make sure they're all good and in good repair and those sort of things, which definitely signals a well-kept and caring parish. But also, do they know where to go? Do you have adequate signage? Your parishioners know how to get to the front door. Some of our parishes, I'm not even sure where the front door is. So, and the front doors many times are big, heavy wooden doors without a visitor table out in front, so that new visitor has to actually put their hand on the handle and open up a very large, in some cases, creaky door that's a little scary. And so always having that simplification walk, if you will, clear signage, reserve some visitor parking. There are some parishes that are very restricted in their parking, as I imagine some of your parishes are as well. Reserve visitor parking, just for that Sunday. Put big signs out there so people don't feel uncomfortable. I have the doors. Again, if you have those heavy wooden creaky doors, don't have a visitor or anybody open them up. Have somebody open them for them. And then coffee hour sponsor, not who's paying for the coffee hour, but somebody to accompany a visitor. A lot of this is blocking and tackling. I know you've done a lot of it, but that's what we're doing. We're trying to get back to the basics of what we did. Some parishes already did these things very well, and they just need to reinitiate them. Others didn't do it, and now it's a good time to hit that reset button and initiate it. So if you look at these four things, right, from the standpoint of a welcome team, a reconnection team, the celebration team, and a simplification team, then you're tying that into a broader strategy of additional actions in the parish from this reconnection team. I think it'll go a long way, recognizing that our parishioners have special needs. And this is kind of the last area. When you look at implementation, you want to implement with intentionality. And the question is, who are you targeting? Well, do you need to target your core members that are always there every Sunday? They're involved in multiple ministries? No, you only have so much time. They might actually be the ones that are doing the calling. Then you have your committed group. And by the way, this breakdown is from Rick Warren as well in his book, Purpose Driven Church. And so then you have your committed or your regulars. They have some ministry involvement. Maybe they might be a co-teacher in Sunday school, maybe on parish council. They have children, no children, but they're enough that they're a regular, if you will. Then you have the general congregation, those that are there once or twice a month. And this is the group that we're seeing slipping a little bit, kind of swapping seats, as I mentioned. And then we have the crowd, basically the unchurched Orthodox. Maybe they're, once or twice a year, 4 times a year, 2 Sundays, maybe for a memorial service, and then Christmas and Easter, or whatever the case might be. That will take a targeted strategy to bring them back into full worship with more regularity as well. And then we have the community, those around us that are non-Orthodox, and the inquirers to have a strategy for them. So when someone comes to the welcome table, this will take, the welcome team should understand these breakdowns and be able to communicate to people in these different ways. So each target audience, not to overcomplicate this, may need a little more specific, or a few elements designed just for their team. Track your plan and report out against it. It's okay to do that because we need to see if our efforts need to be modified, if what we're doing is actually working. And remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, we did that. We really honed in on it and watched what was going on. Same thing with intentionality. If we do a plan, we might have to modify or learn from one another on what's doing well for the connection team. And we need to, do more handwritten notes or whatever the case might be. So you modify as you go. And all along, keep the faith. All along, remember, is that Christ said, and remember, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. This is not a solo journey. We are doing it with Christ, asking for the Holy Spirit to guide us, asking for energy, asking for insights, and asking for the strength to reopen his church and reopen the opportunity for parishioners to come into the full worship of our parishes. So with that, I will stop. There was a lot of talking and I apologize for the length of that, but are there any questions that I can answer at this time?
Steve, that was great. Thank you. Please submit your questions on the Q&A on the chat, and we'll give them to Steve. Stacy, my co-worker in the department, will help me to sort these out and to get them to Steve in a fashion. Steve, I'll give you the first question here.
Sure.
Is from your experience across the Archdiocese, what have you seen as far as patterns on live streaming viewership there was a big surge at the beginning, and then it tailed off? Or has the internet usage and interest been more constant? What have you seen?
It's tailed off significantly. Yeah. There's two elements to that. So when parishes were first live streaming, it was almost like a Sunday afternoon report on how many people we had live streaming. Right? We had 74, we had 118, we had 22, whatever the case might be. There's no exaggeration. I've probably asked that question for 10 parishes over the last 2 weeks. How's your live streaming? Because I'm curious on these sort of things. That's how many people could tell me the number. We as a leadership have neglected it as well. We're not tracking it like we used to. Because the question is, well, if we used to have, pick a number, if we used to have 100 people on a regular Sunday pre-COVID, question is, how many do you have now? Well, they say, well, we have 55 on a regular basis. How many do you have watching live streaming? I don't know. So it's a bit of a combination number there, but yes, it has declined, but also it's not being monitored the way it used to be as well.
Good answer. Any other questions coming through? Anybody have anything they'd like to ask? You can feel free to unmute if the presentation will be posted. Steve's going to give us, this has been recorded, and we'll post the recording to the outreach page and the stewardship page. So it's stewardship.gorge.org and outreach.gorge.org. So you'll be able to find it there, and possibly to our Facebook page as well. So I think we may also have the slides. We'll talk to Steve about that, but we'll see how that works out. Steve, it was engaging. I've seen it several times now, and it gets better every time I hear it.
So that means you're doing the next presentation. You're now certified, right? If you've seen it 4 times, you're now certified for the presentation. Thank you very much. And you've got the slides.
I really wanted, when on the East Coast, we hear from someone west of the Mississippi, our gut response is, well, that won't work here, but this will work here. And you gave us some great information, some solid steps we can take. And I really appreciate the organization you put into it.
Thank you. I did notice a question in the chat here. Well, maybe it was already answered. Yeah, so the question was, did some priests only live stream after or before the gospel? Yeah, and there's one priest who's shared that on many meetings like this, that he has every intention of eventually shutting off the live stream after the gospel.
Steve, one quick one.
That is. Yeah. What's that?
One quick one. Somebody asked if your coffee hour was outside or in the hall as you were talking about hosting coffee hour.
We've had, let's see, 5. We've had 1 inside and 4 outside. The first three weeks were outside, and then people felt a little bit more comfortable. But even inside, we had all the doors open, and it is okay to have indoor gatherings if you're vaccinated without a mask. You can have them without a mask. So, and that's one thing that I've also noticed is that the first week or 2 that people return, a higher number of people wearing masks, and then as you got into weeks 3 and 4, very small percentage of people wearing masks. Yeah, I can't confer anything in that other than people felt more comfortable. I don't know if they're vaccinated, unvaccinated. We don't ask, but we just accept them in any way. You know, I'd like to share a question that was asked of me the last time I did this presentation, and if we could wrap this up with, just a word of what we've seen parishes do to get positive results. I don't like using the term successful, because that's not really what we're about as a church. But what do parishes do? And that one word is love. If we love one another, if we're treating each other with love and understanding, that blankets all this. So the plans that we create should be made in love. The welcome teams should be representing this with a loving approach. And if somebody's having a hard time, then we approach them where they are with love and understanding to try to make them feel comfortable, not make ourselves feel comfortable, make them feel comfortable, because ultimately we want to use our gifts and our talent to make them feel comfortable to approach the chalice, to be one with Christ. So, love.
Steve, on the topic of the chalice, we had a question, and I think this may only apply to New York because I think we were the only district of all the metropolises that was allowed to use multiple spoons. Have you seen any negative effects or reactions to the different ways of distributing the Eucharist during the pandemic, or any concerns?
Well, not recently. I mean, I think most of that was reaction, initially, right? That was, as we all know, that was a very difficult time. But I've not, I think, well, what's interesting is this. So the question is, when do we go back to what pre-pandemic and receiving communion? And now parishes are now asking that question, right? Do I tip my head back and the priest kind of tosses it in? Do you stop using multiple spoons? And so what we're seeing now is that is the strongest last remnant of the changes that have occurred. We're venerating icons, we're kissing the cross, we're having on Dithram right after communion, we're doing all these things. But that's the one element that no one's really addressing at this point. So I don't know when, above my pay grade, obviously, but that's the question that's lingering out there is, when does that, because I think when that changes, it'll signal that we're now really fully back, and we just haven't got there yet.
I think our time is about up. I just really want to thank everyone for hanging in with us, and Steve, a wonderful job again. Lots of solid material here. If anybody has any questions, you can reach us through the department website or emails, and we'd be glad to get any material out that you need. Thank you all again. Thank you, Stacy, for your assistance, and Steve, God bless you for this ministry of yours. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I will send those slides to you right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.